Aha, that's the big question. Is there going to be a war in Israel? Gary Stearman holding up Psalm 83, the subtitle, How Israel Becomes the Next Mideast Superpower. Bill Salas, the author, who will be speaking to you for the next few minutes, has some really cogent ideas to share with you. Bill Salas, come on up. Welcome, Bill Salas. He's one of our great guests.
Thank you, Gary. Well, good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me over there in the West Wing and the lower 40? Okay. Get a little feedback. Okay, well, it's great to be here with you all the way from Palm Desert, California, escaping some heat. It's about 110 degrees over there. So I always like to speak somewhere in the summer other than Palm Desert. Well, you're enjoying your food. I'm going to give you a little food for thought, because man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So we're going to talk turkey tonight on America's role in the coming prophetic wars. The answer to Gary's question, yes, war is coming to Israel, but not war, but wars, plural. I'm still getting some feedback, by the way. Quite a bit, actually. There's going to be a big war with the cousins between the Israelites and their Edomite cousins, who's going to form a coalition, a confederacy of Arabs. In Psalm 83, I'll be talking about that. And then that's followed by an even bigger, more massive Middle East war in Ezekiel 38, Gog of Magog invasion. And then, of course, there's the Armageddon War. Now, all of these wars have at least two things in common. One is they want to attempt harm and genocide to the Jews, and two, I believe America has a significant role in all three of these wars. So here we are, like Gary said, a half a world away, watching things unravel in the Middle East. And we've got Syria's got chemical weapons going about, over 100,000 Syrians killed in a 2.5-year revolution now. Egypt, who knows what's going to happen next with Mohammed Morsi now been ousted under a military junta at this point. Iran's about to have a nuclear weapon, and some of us are very concerned that our current administration's foreign policy is a little bit on the weak side. It's very reminiscent to 1979 when Jimmy Carter couldn't get 52 hostages freed from Iran for 444 days. And so I don't know about you, but I'm a little concerned over the next 3.5 years we might get a little something like this. Now I know what you're thinking. No, that's not Tiger Woods. So those of you who are familiar with my books, you've probably seen this image inside of my books. I've coined the term for the Psalm 83 Arab countries that share common borders with Israel. You see them listed inside of this Pentagon here in the shaded area by their ancient names. I call them an inner circle. And you'll see their names are superimposed, their ancient names over their modern day equivalents. You've got Edomites and Ammonites and Moabites and the Gigabites and termites and parasites are all in there. Conversely, you have an outer ring, a term I coined in Israelis on my first book, which is with Ezekiel 38 and 39. Not the inner circle, the outer ring. You can see the inner circle inside that Pentagon, but the outer ring of the Gog of Magog invasion of Ezekiel 38, they're all across the boards over there, as you can see. So we'll be talking about them as well. Now, all eyes were on Ezekiel 38 and 39 in the prophetic community until Tom Horn had the foresight to publish my book Israelistine, which deals, this was in the summer of 2008, which deals with the epic Psalm 83 Arab-Israeli War. It deals with the prelude, the event, and the aftermath. And until that time, most of the prophecy teachers were teaching that Ezekiel 38 would be the next Mideast prophetic news headline. They had generally overlooked Psalm 83, thinking it was merely just an imprecatory prayer. So presently, my new book, I have called Psalm 83 The Missing Prophecy Revealed, and this is the one that has been doing so well on Prophecy in the News. And I call it The Missing Prophecy Revealed because it was generally missed, but also because when you understand its intrinsic prophetic values, it becomes the the prophetic puzzle piece that completes the end-time equation perfectly. Once you put it where it belongs, and I believe it's an imminent event we should be watching for, all the other prophecies, especially dealing with these wars in the Middle East, fall into perfect perspective. It also comes with a DVD with 3 hours of Power Pack teaching, PowerPoint presentations. And so now the question is Psalm 83 or Ezekiel 38, which is the next Middle East news headline. And that's a chapter I have in both the book and the DVD. I point out in this chapter, because some people think Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38 might be the same prophecy, that there are different participants. And I just showed you a map of an inner circle and an outer ring. So entirely different participants, different populations. I'll be unpacking that a little bit more here as I talk. But there's also different motives. The Psalm 83 countries are coming to destroy Israel, to take the pastures of God for themselves as a possession. They want to take the promised land. They want to push the Jews into the sea. They want to destroy the nation of Israel. Russia's motive is to come for great plunder and booty. Okay? And then there's different destructions. I point out in numerous prophecies that the Israeli Defense Forces exist today in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. They will be the tool that will be used to stop the final Arab concluding war of Psalm 83. Now, they're nowhere to be found in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Conversely, it's the Lord, we're told in Ezekiel 38 verses 16 through Ezekiel 39 verses 7, that stops that battle, that massive Magog invasion, divinely, with an earthquake and with fire and brimstone and hailstone. And then in the conclusion, in the aftermath, it says in Ezekiel 39:7 that I will uphold my holy name in the midst of my people Israel, and they shall not profane my name anymore, and the nation shall know I am the Lord. So we've got different things going on. Now, along these lines, recently, a dear friend of mine, Doug Hamp, who's in here with us tonight, and he's also a wonderful speaker here, he had me on his radio show, According to the Scriptures, and he and his co-host Dave Lehman asked the real tough questions that have emerged since Psalm 83 has been introduced on the scene. And so we just came out with it in a CD, and they asked me, is the psalm merely a prayer? Was the prophecy already fulfilled historically? Was it fulfilled in the wars of 1948, 1967, 1973? Is it part of Ezekiel 38, or is it part of Armageddon? And I think you'll be fascinated by my answers, and I think you'll agree with me that I've put to rest all these objections and concerns about it. But you'll have to make that decision on yourself. So we invite you to go out to the table and pick up that CD audio. Now, here's another map of Ezekiel 38, the belligerents involved in that. Compliments of Koinonia House. Chuck Missler drew this map, his people. And I like this map because it puts a clear picture of who's involved. You've got Magog up to the north, that would be Russia, and their southern steppes, that would be the former Soviet Union, some of the breakaway republics like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Nuzistan, Takistan, Afghanistan. And then you also got Turkey and Iran and Ethiopia and Libya. And these are the general consensus, you can see them listed up there, of who's involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And I'm going to start there because I want to get into Psalm 83 and America's role in the Psalm 83, because I think it has very relevant information for us in America today. Gog forms this evil plan, and it says, thus says the Lord God, on that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you will make an evil plan. And Gog we would identify as the leader of Russia at the time. Most of us believe that would be the leader of Russia at that time. It very well could be Vladimir Putin, because we're seeing, we're in the latter days, and that's when this prophecy does occur. He goes on to say, you will say, I will go up to against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, and all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take plunder and to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against the people gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land. So we get an understanding of what his evil plan is going to be. And we also, in these passages, find out the type of Israel that's going to exist at the time this evil plan of Gog's is executed. And personally, I don't think that Israel exists entirely right now. And if it doesn't, this prophecy cannot find fulfillment right now until that Israel exists. Well, let's break that down a little bit. They're going to be regathered from the nations in the latter years, brought back from persecution, from the sword, into Israel, which had long been desolate. And we could all agree, I think that is going on right now. We'll put a check mark right there. But they must be dwelling in the midst of the land that had long been desolate. And the Hebrew word is tabur, and it means in the center, smack dab in the center. And the land that Ezekiel was familiar with is measured out in Genesis 15:18. And it says it's from the river of Egypt, the Nile, to the river Euphrates, which courses through Iraq and Syria. And presently the center or the midst of that land would be Jordan. And Israel's not in possession of Jordan. Someday they will be. And if you want to find out when I believe that will be, you're going to want to come to my talk on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock when I talk about the future of Israel, Iran, and the Arab states. I believe they're going to get that land in Jordan after Psalm 83. And I'll point out the scriptures as to why. But they must also be a peaceful people dwelling securely, dwelling without walls, bars, nor gates, having gold and silver and acquired livestock and goods, wealthy nation possessing booty and great plunder. So presently Israel is not dwelling without walls, bars, nor gates. They have a 403-mile-long wall called the partition fence that separates Palestinian terrorism from the West Bank from getting into Israel proper. So they also have checkpoints and security gates throughout Israel. They're not dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates. They're not dwelling securely primarily because on the right hand and on the left hand, all the surrounding peoples of the inner circle that I listed in that map earlier, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and you throw in the terrorist populations, you see them listed up there, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhoods. They don't allow Israel to dwell securely presently. Israel's been at war with them ever since it's become a nation, with fragile peace treaties between Egypt and Jordan and Israel at this point, which are in very much a jeopardy of being broken amidst what's going on or voided. So the Hebrew words for dwelling securely are yeshav v'tach, and from biblical precedent, it's a security that is achieved militarily, and Israel will achieve security, in my estimation, militarily when the IDF executes vengeance on these Arabs that will come against them to destroy the nation of Israel in Psalm 83. And if you look 10 chapters back in Ezekiel 28, it says that judgments will be executed upon them that surround Israel, that despise Israel, and then that is when Israel will dwell securely, Yeshav B'tach. So you go back 10 chapters to Ezekiel 28, and you'll find what I'm saying there. Now what's interesting, God's evil plan may be extremely comprehensive. What I find fascinating when you look at a map of where these individual countries are involved in Gog's war. Now Israel's going to be very wealthy. And Gog's going to form an alliance that I think is really quite strategic. They're predominantly Muslim countries that will probably be extremely upset with Israel, having won a war against the Arab Muslims in Psalm 83, because those are predominantly Muslim countries in Psalm 83. And it looks like Israel's going to have difficulty amidst Gog's evil plan of getting commerce out into world markets. Remember, they're going to be quite wealthy because Gog's coming after plunder and great booty. So you could see that with Iran in the coalition, they'll be able to block Israel's ability to get commerce through the Persian Gulf. Turkey will be able to stop them getting it into Europe through the northern part of the Mediterranean. Libya would be able to stop it from getting into Africa, as well as down through the Red Sea. You got Ethiopia, Sudan, and Somalia. And then trying to get it out through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Western world. You even have Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. So could it be possible that Gog's evil plan begins with a strategic alliance that tries to blockade Israel's ability to export commerce out into the nations of the world? But we're not only told about this group involved that's fighting in the coalition with Gog and Magog, but we also have these other participants listed. We've got Dedan and Sheba and the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions. And they're not fighting with Russia in this confederacy. They appear to be protesting Russia's ambitions to come and get that great plunder and booty. So we see that Dedan is in Saudi Arabia and Sheba is in Yemen. But who are the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions? Well, here's a little bit about what they say, and they add a little more detail to the plan that we find out from Gog of Magog. Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish and all their young lions will say, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty, to carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, to take great plunder? Great plunder. The Hebrew word is shalal for great plunder. And it can be translated despoil. So in other words, have you come to take spoil from the spoilers? Have you come to take the death spoil? Could they be referring to potential riches gained in part from the Arab spoils of war from Israel? So who are these merchants of Tarshish? You're going to find as you comb through the commentaries that there are two predominantly lines of thought of who the merchants of Tarshish are and their young lions. Some believe it's Spain would be the merchants of Tarshish, and their young lions would be like South America, maybe Central America, that kind of spawned out through the loins of Spain. And then others, and this is what I subscribe to, believe that the merchants of Tarshish would be the UK, and out from them, of course, you had young lions come, young villages, it says in some translations, would be North America. You had Canada, America, and, of course, Australia. So I'm going to give you my reasons biblically and geopolitically briefly why I think it is America. And I don't add a lot of merit to the argument that it's Spain. I'll let you do your own homework on that, but it just doesn't make any sense to me when you look at what I'm about to show you. But one thing for certain is that what we have here now is someone's wanting to conduct commerce with a very wealthy Israel. They're labeled as the merchants of Tarshish. They're not labeled as the athletes of Tarshish or the politicians of Tarshish. And the Hebrew word is sakar, and it means commercial, customer, merchants, traders, traffickers, that sort of thing in the Hebrew. Who is this that wants to conduct commerce with Israel? So we're going to look biblically at who they are, where they are, and what they're notorious for. Well, who they are is they're one of the sons of Javan, and we find out in Genesis 10, verses 4 through 5. And Tarshish, by all these sons of Javan, were the isles of the Gentiles, divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, and in their nations. The isles of the Gentiles were formed, and you're going to find Tarshish associated with the isles and several other verses in the Bible. There's a list of them there. They're in the Psalms and Isaiah. And now some archaeologists believe that the ancient name of Britain was Tarshish, and that it was beyond Gibraltar. Now the Strait of Gibraltar separates Spain from Morocco and the North African there. It's the last body of water between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. Some people believe it was all involved in the Atlantic Ocean. And what is the UK? Well, they are oversized islands. So this is interesting. Where is Tarshish? Well, we know that when Jonah was supposed to give a message to Nineveh that they were going to be judged, he wanted to hightail it in the opposite direction. And, of course, he went back. He got swallowed in the belly of a whale, and he did go back to Nineveh. But we're told in Jonah 1:3 that he boarded a ship in the port of Joppa and headed toward Tarshish. And we know that that's headed westward from another passage in Psalm 48, verse 7, that says, "Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind." So it would be ships coming from the west that if a harsh east wind could come, would break their trip. So that's where they are. They're to the west. What was Tarshish notorious for? They had advanced, vast wealth. We're told here in Ezekiel 27, verse 12, that Tarshish was thy, and he's referring to Tyre, which is in Lebanon, merchant by reason of the multitude of all kinds of riches and silver and iron and tin and lead. They traded in thy affairs. And also they had advanced ships to be able to carry that vast wealth long distances. And you see that in Ezekiel 27. The ships of Tarshish did sing of thee in thy market, and thou was replenished and made very glorious in the midst of the seas. And you'll see merchants, the theme of merchants in Tarshish 7 times in the Bible, and these advanced ships 11 times in the Bible as well. So biblically, to me, it favors the UK. Let's look geopolitically now. The Ezekiel 38 prophecy occurs in the last days, and we're in the last days, folks. Who thinks we're living in the last days presently? Okay. Now, when I ask that question at most churches, 20% of the hands go up. I think we had 100% here, so that's why you're at a prophecy conference. Now, what has been going on since Israel became a nation in the Middle East? Well, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled, and Britain and France was given dominion over the area. And subsequently, you see France was involved with sovereignty over what is now Syria and Lebanon, and Tarshish, if you will, or Britain, was involved with sovereignty over which is now Iraq and Jordan and Israel. So we see that Britain was involved in this, but where is Spain? There's no Spain. There's France and there's Britain. And by the way, Spain is almost bankrupt. According to the International Monetary Fund, this last May, they announced that Spain is on the verge of bankruptcy. Well, so I think that argues geopolitically for a latter-day involvement with Tarshish being the UK. Now, what about their young lions? Has South America been involved in brokering any peace deals between the Arabs and the Jews? No, but the young lions of America have. I mean, we are actively involved in the past and presently still. Here's a picture of Carter with Sadat and Menachem Begum involved in that treaty in 1979 in Camp David with Egypt and Israel. And you see another one here with Clinton and King Hussein I and Rabin with that treaty for Jordan. So I think the general thing that we've got going here is America is probably involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39, but the involvement is concerning. We don't seem to be fighting with Russia, thank God, but we don't seem to be fighting with Israel either, because it's the Lord who stops that war, right? I just shared that with you. It's not America that stops that war, that defeats the Russian invaders. I believe it happens after Psalm 83 as well, but I think it might also happen after the rapture. Now, I'm not going to set dates on the rapture. I am a pre-trib rapture believer. I believe Jesus is coming for the tribulation. I'm so pre-trib I don't even buy post-toasties. And I get goosebumps at the sound of a trumpet. But just imagine if it is after the rapture, because remember, this is about God upholding his holy name in the midst of his people Israel. The church really doesn't have to be there for that. Let's say Psalm 83 has happened. I'm going to speculate for a moment. Russia will have no problem forming a coalition of Muslim countries. Now, Russia's not Muslim, but the other populations are, that are very upset with Israel because they would have just defeated the Arab Muslims and probably expanded into some of their lands. And now the church is gone, and if that's the rapture, so now a lot of America's in trouble because a lot of Christians will be gone. So a lot of Christians will be gone in the UK as well, merchants of Tarshish and the young lions. And now the Muslim armies, of course, they won't be compromised at all because no Muslims are going to be raptured, folks. I mean, they worship Allah. Jesus is coming for those that worship him, his bride. So you could see that Russia would have if this scenario plays out, a very formidable offensive here with vast Muslim armies that are not affected by the rapture, and the West could do very little about that after the rapture. Now, I'm speculating there, but we do appear to be protesters, and I do believe this is after Psalm 83, and it is possible that Ezekiel 38 happens after the rapture. So the America in that scenario could be an entirely different America. Now I want to move our attention to Psalm 83. Inside of the Confederacy of Psalm 83, listed first are the tents of Edom, the Edomites. Edomites were descended from Esau. Esau was the twin brother of Jacob. Jacob later became called Israel in Genesis 32, verses 28. And the Edomites we find connected with Esau in Genesis 36. In the prophecy, they're listed as the tents of Edom, a habitation condition. And they're listed first, which means it tends to banner their plight. They became living in tents after the first war in 1948, the Arab-Israeli War. You had the Palestinian refugees. There's a picture of them, and Edomites today have ethnical representation inside of the Palestinian refugees, and I point that out in my Psalm 83 book. Now, this is what they were in 1948. Now, this is what they want today. They want their own state. That's Mahmoud Abbas, and he went to the United Nations at the end of last year and tried to achieve non-member state status, and he got it. So now he's on even keel with the Vatican. But so this is what they want, folks. So we're going to take a moment here now and turn our attention to Psalm 83. It opens with, "Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace and do not be still, O God." Now, it was written by Asaph 3,000 years ago, who was a prophet. We're told in 2 Chronicles 29:30 that he was a beholder of vision, a chozah, a seer is what it says in there. And that means he's a prophet. And he says, do not keep silent. And this fascinates me because we're told in Amos 3:7, surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. And it's interesting, the Lord isn't keeping silent about Psalm 83. You're hearing about it tonight. Millions of people across the world have now heard about it. Hal Lindsey's teaching about it. Chuck Missler's teaching about it. Many of the speakers here are teaching about it. And if you do a Google search right now under the Psalm 83 War or the Psalm 83 Prophecy, you're going to see that you'll find well over a couple million hits combined. Now, this was not the case in 2008 when I released my book, Israelistine. You could barely find anything under these searches. And I know because it's very difficult to find information on Psalm 83. That's why it took me 11 years of research to come out with my books now on this topic. So he goes on to say, "For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, 'Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you.'" It is a confederacy. They want to come together to destroy the nation of Israel. They consult together. They form a devious plan. They want to push the Jews into the sea. They want to have a Palestinian state if this is to find application in our time. He goes on to list who they are. I've showed you some maps on it by their ancient names, the Edomites and Ammonites, and their modern-day equivalents. We showed you that map as well. This is the group specific to Psalm 83. They're going to want to come together to cut the nation of Israel off. It's going to be a war, and it says in verse 12, they want to take for themselves the pastures of God for their possession. They don't want peace for the Jews, in my estimation, folks. They don't want a two-state solution. They want peace without the Jews. They want one more Arab state, and they want to fly the flag of Palestine over it. That's what I think you're watching, and so keep your eye on that. Now, Psalm 83 is going to occur. One morning you're going to wake up, missiles are going to be flying, and you're going to slap yourself on the forehead and go, "Oh my goodness, this could be Psalm 83. But you shouldn't be surprised, because Psalm 83 to me is a prophecy in process. We've been seeing this hatred of the Arabs toward the Jews since Israel became a nation. They've been fighting wars against the Jews, some of the very populations I just showed you on the maps. And America has a very significant role because of the power we possess right now. We didn't become a superpower by our granddaddy's good looks. And I'm going to share with you the reasons that God established this country and blessed it so much. And we do have an important role in Psalm 83. Now, I make the comparison about Psalm 83 being a prophecy in process to Israel. One day, May 14th, 1948, the world woke up and there was an Israel. But if you were paying attention, if you were a student of Bible prophecy, you wouldn't need to be surprised by that. There were clues over the prior 50 years that God was going to rebirth the nation of Israel in fulfillment of numerous Bible prophecies. And at the time, the British Empire, 50 years back, before 1948, was emerging as a superpower. So I'm going to make the comparison of the British Empire's responsibility to the rebirthing of the nation Israel, which was a prophecy in process, to America's role, to the fulfillment of Psalm 83. The first clue that Israel was going to become a nation was when Theodor Herzl, considered the father of Zionism, wrote his book in 1897 called Der Judenstaat, which stands for the Jewish state in German. In 1897, he hosted a congress, the first Zionistic Congress in Basel, and he had Jewish leaders from various parts of the world come together in Basel. And his book, he introduced his book and talked at that time, and the theme was anti-Semitism is going to arise and get tougher and stronger in Europe, and we need to have a homeland to get away from it back in our ancient homeland, and that was the Zionistic movement starting way back then. And he was absolutely right. History showed it. Jews came in harm's way in World War I, and especially in World War II. But he said something interesting in his diary at that time. He said, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I had said this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. If not in 5 years, certainly in 50, everyone will know it." Now, do you realize 50 years later, the United Nations approved Resolution 181, which called for the reestablishment of the Jewish state, 50 years after he had written this. That was your first clue that Israel was going to become a nation. If you were paying attention, and you saw that the Jews, after being set out in the nations of the world for so long, are now coming together wanting to come back to their homeland, and you know God was going to reestablish the nation of Israel someday, that should have caught your attention back then. The second clue, World War I. Germany hooked up with Austria and Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire joined them, and they fought against the Central Powers of Britain and France and Russia, and they lost. And Lord Balfour of the UK, he came forward with a declaration. And here's some verbiage from that declaration. It says, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This is in 1917. That was what it was called back then, Palestine. It achieved that name in 135 AD. So now we see that the British Empire, and I showed you a map, that they had control over that area, and France had control now after this war over Syria and Lebanon. They were calling for a Jewish state. And this is what that state was to consist of. It was to consist of modern-day Jordan and Israel, much larger than the Jewish state today, and much more in line with the land that was granted to Abraham in Genesis 15:18. The San Remo Conference in 1920, it was legislated that that was supposed to happen. But you know what, folks? The UK didn't do that. They did not execute on that, and there was no Jewish state implemented. Now, at the time, the British Empire, there was a saying in the 1910s, 1920s, that the sun never sets on the British Empire. And here's a map of all the areas that the British Empire had control over, sovereignty over. There was, by 1922, 458 million people were under British rule. That's about a fifth of the world's population at that time. Over 13 million square miles were controlled by the British Empire. Literally, the sun would rise in the east and would set on the west, and the British Empire would never set on it. That was about a quarter of the world's landmass at that time. Now, to explain what went wrong with the British Empire, I want to just introduce you quickly to how God relates to the nations, so you can see the purposes of the UK, but also, more importantly, the purposes for our country. God establishes nations and defines their boundaries, and we're told that in Acts 17:26, that God made from one every nation of mankind, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation. So he establishes the nations, defines their boundaries, and he determines when a nation will cease to exist. And God has a purpose for each nation, both general and specific. God blesses and disciplines nations in accordance with their obedience to him and their treatment of the Jewish people. Many of you are probably familiar with Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, where God said, I will make Abraham a great nation, I will bless you. And he says, I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, and I will curse those who curse you. And that goes on through Abraham, his son Isaac, his grandson Jacob, his great-grandson, the 12 tribes of Israel, and finds application today in the nation of Israel. How we treat Abraham and his descendants is how we are treated back. If we bless them, we'll be blessed. If we curse them, we'll be cursed. This is still God's foreign policy. It's still intact. And lastly, God holds nations in contempt because of their pride and rebellion and because they serve as idols. Now, the UK did not execute on their making their role. God gave them the authority. He gave them the power. They became a superpower. God knew it was no easy undertaking to rebirth the nation of Israel. He blessed the UK. The sun never used to set on it. And they did not do what they were supposed to do. And so in that process, he subjected the Jews to the Holocaust. In World War II, and 6 million Jews, as you know, lost their lives. And ultimately, Israel becomes a nation. It was a process. The first clue was Theodor Herzl's Zionistic movement. The second clue was World War I. The third clue was World War II. And in 1947, the partition plan, Israel gets what's called that small little notch of land that they occupy presently. And of course, you see at the time, the purple, they were going to have an Arab state as well, but the Arabs rejected that. And in 1967, Israel took over that land, and that's a controversial land presently. So the world woke up, and certainly enough, there was in Israel, but they should not have been caught off guard. The sun used to never set on the British Empire in 1920, but by 1990, the sun always sets on the British Empire. It lost its ability to have the superpower status that it once had. Now, how does that relate to us? Now, presently, the UK has got about 63 million people. That's about 14% of what they had in 1920 that they have governance over. It consists of about 94,000 square miles, which is about 7.5% of what it controlled 70 years prior. So big drop in the blessings of the Lord. We're going to wake up. Psalm 83 is going to happen. They're going to want to wipe Israel off the map. We shouldn't be caught off guard of this. They're going to want to fly the flag of Palestine over there. This should not be shocking news. We have a process developing in 1948. We already saw this hatred emerging as they came and fought against Israel in the Arab-Israeli War. The tents of Edom became a reality in the aftermath, the Palestinian refugees. We had the Six-Day War in 1967, the same kind of hatred. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan involved in Psalm 83, involved in that war. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. We have been seeing the stage set for Psalm 83 since Israel became a nation over 65 years ago. So how does that apply to the United States, which is now emerged as a superpower in replace of the UK? As the British Empire declined, we emerged. And again, we didn't become a superpower because of our granddaddy's good looks. America, application to the United States. God raised up this nation with the purpose of using our great natural resources and technical ingenuity to spread the gospel all over the world. And we have, folks. We were a country founded in freedom of worship, one nation under God, endowed by our Creator. This is in our Declaration of Independence. We have sent missionaries out in the 1800s and 1900s and still do presently and preach the gospel to the world. We were called to do that. Matter of fact, America has probably done that more than any other country since the church age. We were called to that purpose. But we were also called to be a safe haven for the Jewish people. The very first Jew came over here, although some of us think Christopher Columbus was a Jew, but that's another study. But 1649, we had Jews coming over. Solomon Franco, the first Jew. 1830, 15,000 Jews in Charleston. 1880, 250,000. And you can see in 2011, we had about 5 million Jews in this country presently. Recently surpassed by Israel. We think there's about 6 million there now. But to attest to this, the nearest closest country with a large Jewish population is France, and they've only got about 483,500. So we were clearly called to be a safe haven for the Jewish people. He even gave us the blessing of serving as the key nation and the rebirthing and nurturing of the nation of Israel. We had a world leader at the time, Harry S. Truman, who was a strong Israel advocate. He was one of the main leaders that got UN Resolution 180 when the partition plan approved. You see a picture of him with the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, and Chaim gave him the traditional gift, which was the Torah. And Harry S. Truman said, I always wanted one of those. And as we fulfilled his purposes, he poured out blessings upon us, blessings like an unparalleled freedom and prosperity and immense power and worldwide influence. But in the 21st century, folks, this is where we come up to speed right now. Here's what we've been doing with our role as the guardian of Israel, per se. Of course, that's God is the guardian of Israel, but we've had a role to fulfill. Here's Bill Clinton attempting a land for peace deal, trying to give Arabs God's land so that they won't try to destroy the nation of Israel. 2000, George Bush, same thing in 2003, the Bush Roadmap Plan, trying to give the promised land, two-state solution for peace with the Arabs. And now, even worse, the worst plan of them all, the Saudi Peace Initiative of 2002, developed by King Abdullah Aziz of Saudi Arabia, totally a pro-Arab plan. And it calls for land for peace. They want Israel to give back the land it got in 1967. They want East Jerusalem to be a capital of the Jewish state. They want millions of Palestinians that don't like Israel to come back into Israel proper. That's what this plan calls for, and our president, John Kerry, is promoting it. We are doing the Arabs' bidding of Psalm 83 so that we can help the Arabs get land, take the pastures of God for themselves as a possession, and put them in a better position to cut the nation of Israel off, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. We are dividing God's land is what we're trying to do here, folks, and that's the very thing we're told in Joel 3:2 that God ultimately judges the nations for at the time of Armageddon. I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. Now, America is involved, all nations, but it'll be America after the rapture. And an America, in my estimation, after Psalm 83 and after Ezekiel 38, not an America like we know today. But concurrently, I think God is upset with what we're doing right now, trying to give up his land that he has plans for for the Jewish people. And what's been happening in the 21st century in correlation have been remedial judgments as we've been trying to cough up God's land. We've been involved in the towers were toppled on September 11th as God's hedge of protection has apparently come down and he's warning us. We've been involved in 3 Middle East wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, and we're about to enter into a no-fly zone, perhaps in Syria, which Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Dempsey says could cost us $1 billion a month, and the outcome is unpredictable. Could be into a 4th war. We've had natural disasters, economic upheavals. We've had our nation's costliest hurricane, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, a Category 5, followed by Hurricane Rita. We've had record-breaking tornado seasons in April of 2011, 3 days, 14 states, 241 tornadoes ravished through the Bible Belt on through the east over there, causing havoc and destruction in its wake. And we find out that the worst tornado in our nation's history appeared to have happened in May in Oklahoma, just recently, of 2013. Is God trying to say something? We've had a mortgage meltdown, 2007. We've had an economic crisis in 2008. We've had the largest oil spill in our nation's history, the BP oil spill in 2010. And we have a crop of youth growing up right now that feel like they're growing up in a helpless and hopeless environment. And we're seeing them start to act out. Now, this was a crazy individual, but he went to Newtown, Connecticut, and killed first graders. And Newtown, Connecticut was dubbed as America's safest town. Terrorism is back on our shores. Has the hedge of protection come down from God? The Boston Marathon. A good friend of mine, Dr. David Reagan, many of you may know him. There's a picture of him and I. He's the founder of Lamb and Lion Ministries. He came out with a really important magazine for our time as Lamplighter Magazine. Here's a copy of it, May and June issue of this year with Jonathan Cahn, who's going to be speaking after me here. And Jonathan Cahn wrote the best-selling book, The Harbinger, which harbingers are presaged warnings about what's going to come to this country. And the Lord had called, and David Reagan is calling him, you can see on the bottom of the slide there, an end-time prophet to America, which is a big deal for David Reagan to say that. He's very conservative. I mean, it'd be easier to achieve sainthood from the Pope to have a guy like Dr. David Reagan call a guy a prophet. Now, he writes something very interesting, and I'm going to quote it. I'm going to give you a few quotes. The trigger point of America's destruction, I believe the trigger point for our nation occurred in November 2012 when President Obama was reelected. We have ignored the prophets. And the remedial judgments. God has responded by giving us the kind of leader we deserve. He goes on to say, we are now positioned to be delivered from judgment to destruction. Could that be? To destruction. Well, I just showed you some remedial judgments that correlate with us trying to cough up God's land for an elusive two-state solution. What about the prophets? Well, Jonathan Cahn's got the best-selling book out there. He's warning this country. There's prophetic voices also that have been lifted up. Mark Hitchcock wrote a book not too long ago, The Late Great United States, one of the speakers here. Terry James wrote the book American Apocalypse. And Joe Rosenberg recently came out with a book called Implosion. And I've got some good news and bad news because I've read these books. The good news is they all come up with a general consensus. The bad news is that's not good news for this country. Look at the names of these books. These are not sugar and spice and everything nice. This is an apocalypse. Terry James, the country's going to implode. Joe Rosenberg, the late great United States. It was once great, but now it's a late great United States. They believe America is under judgment. I spoke with Hal Lindsey, several of the other speakers here. We were all at the Future Congress in January of 2013, this year. And Hal came out and spoke. And he said he was disappointed when Barack Obama won the presidency, but this is what he said. He's convinced the Lord has one purpose for President Barack Obama, and that is to destroy this country. And I was sitting next to Doug Hamp when Hal threw his hand down on the side. And he said, I'm telling you that this country is gone, folks. I'm not saying that it is going, but that it's already gone. And Doug and I, our mouths dropped. We looked at each other like, wow. Because Hal Lindsey has been used by the Lord mightily. with his late great United States and his TV show and things like that. Even Chuck Missler, speaking here, for the weekend with the other speakers, a friend of mine. Matter of fact, I came to know the Lord through Chuck Missler teaching a study on the book of Revelation. He teaches so well, and I said, gee, the Lord knows the end from the beginning, Chuck. That's right, Bill. Well, I'm going to accept him. He just issued a very important video, and you can catch it on his website or on YouTube, called To America with Love. And this came out on June 24th. It's on YouTube that was posted. And one of the quotes is, "The light of freedom is quickly dimming, and you, too, are now heading into the tyranny of a police state and the slavery of debt." Now, Chuck can say that, speaking in the third person, because now he lives in New Zealand. So you, too, you Americans, that sort of thing. Now, do we get the leader we deserve? Well, here's our president. He said in 2008, we are no longer only a Christian nation, but also a Jewish nation and a Buddhist nation and a Hindu nation and a nation of non-believers. He came out in December of 2010, and he repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military. Eric Holder in February of 2011 said the Obama administration cannot defend the constitutionality of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is one man married to one woman. Barack Obama has said same-sex couples should be able to marry. And of course, the Supreme Court in June of this year struck down a key part of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act and declared the same-sex couples who are legally married deserve equal rights to the benefits under the federal law that go to all married couples. Now, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 5, "A man shall leave his father and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one." That sounds like Doma to me. "And therefore what God has put together," in verse 6, "let man not separate." So this is what we got. I had the opportunity, I think I was the first to write an article in the Prophecy in the News magazine as an external author. And this just came out, and this July issue right here. And Gary and Bob asked me to write about America's pro-Arab peace plan. Is it a blessing or a curse? And I articulate about all the things I've been talking about here for you tonight, and many more things that I wrote about. And I say this as I conclude that article: as one that has been intensely researching the climactic concluding Arab-Israeli war predicted over 3,000 years ago in Psalm 83, it is my opinion that America's fate now rests in the hands of the political leadership that will be in place when this Psalm prophecy finds its final fulfillment. In my estimation, the Psalm 83 war is imminent, and the Obama-Kerry team may be that political leadership. If they don't bless Israel in this epic biblical battle, then they will likely seal the coffin on this country. The sun always sets on the British Empire today because they failed to fulfill their sovereign responsibility to establish the nation of Israel. And likewise, America stands at the similar crossroads when it comes to the coming Arab-Israeli war. What will be the outcome? Will America survive because it supports Israel, or will it fail to come alongside its greatest ally in the Middle East? Stay tuned. It appears the Mideast missiles are about to fly, and the fate of America's future will soon be known. Will it be blessed, or will it be cursed? We need to be a strong shoulder of support for Israel, always to be blessed, and especially in light of what's coming with the wars of the Middle East. I'm going to conclude by telling you I had an opportunity to be on the Praise the Lord TV show with Jonathan Cahn. There's a picture of us there in April of this year. And they talked to Jonathan about his book, The Harbinger, and to me about my book, Psalm 83. And afterwards, Jonathan and I had a couple hours together in the hotel, just in my room, just talking about the days in which we live. And I guarantee you, I was so blessed. I felt like I was sitting with the Jeremiah of our time. And so I scooted to the edge of my seat, and I said to Jonathan, I said, "So now that you've issued The Harbinger, it's been a bestseller, and we're all aware that this country's in serious trouble, the warnings are there, what do you think will happen to this country?" And he said, "Well, politically and secularly, it's getting darker. They're not responding to the message. It does not look like there'll be a national revival, because without national repentance, you cannot have a national revival." He said in September 11th, it appeared that when the towers came down that there would be a national revival, but there was no national repentance. What it was defiance. We're going to bounce back, is what America said. And so he points that out in his book aptly. So, but what he did say to me is that amidst the darkness, God's light can still shine amongst his people. Amidst the darkness, God's light can still shine amongst its people. And I can't think of a better example of a dark country, spiritually blind, where the church has to meet underground than China. Can we play this? Can we get some sound?
这是我们教会这个时候最需要的，真是我们最需要的时候。
Amidst the darkness, the light can still shine among God's people. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, our president may be Barack Obama, but our king is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And our country is America, but our kingdom is the kingdom of God. And it's still advancing amidst the darkness, and China is an example. So as I conclude, I want to leave you with this exhortation. Christ in you is the hope of glory, and you are the light. And if we are to bring a change, it has to start with us. So I would say, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father. Thank you.